Good morning. I am Saini at the University of Canberra. I'm speaking with Michelle Grattan about politics in Australia. This is our first conversation for 2019, so let me wish all our viewers a very happy new year. Good morning, Michelle.
And happy new year to you and the viewers.
Thank you, and to you as well. Michelle, let me begin with the good old saying that politics makes strange bedfellows, and I'm talking about Warren Mundine. Warren Mundine is the former Labour Party president. He is not from the area of Gilmore. He's not a member of the Liberal Party, and yet Prime Minister comes in and installs him against the local choice as the candidate for the seat of Gilmore. This is a very marginal seat. There's about 1% margin there that you have referred to in your article in the conversation. Please help us make sense of this, what sounds like, what looks like a very strange decision.
I think many people think that this does not make a lot of sense. There's been a lot of trouble in this electorate, and the previous, or the current member, who will soon be previous, Anne Sudmalis, said that she was not going to contest again. She claimed branch stacking, bullying, all sorts of nastiness. Now, a local candidate was selected by the branch members in the electorate, but then this has happened and this candidate has been pushed aside. Scott Morrison has accused him of bullying and said that Warren Mundine will be an ideal person. As you mentioned, Warren Mundine does not come from the area, although he's an Indigenous leader who has relatives and ancestors from that region, and he says he's really at home there. But he has this Labor Party background. Not only that, until last week when he resigned from the party, he was a member of the Liberal Democrats, and they were considering whether he should run as a Senate candidate. So he's been double dating, as it were, for quite a few months with the Liberal Democrats on the one hand and negotiations with Scott Morrison and other senior Liberals on the other. He's been pretty desperate over his career to get a seat, and I think what he's done is take the best offer available. Now, why Scott Morrison thinks this is a good idea is frankly not at all clear. You'll remember that many Liberals were suspicious of Malcolm Turnbull because he had been known to once flirt with the Labor Party to possibly stand as a candidate for them. Now they have a person who was a federal president, national president of the Labor Party. It's very strange doings.
Let's dig a little bit deeper in this issue of multiple memberships and so on for Mundine. You have addressed this issue in your article in the conversation. You refer to it as he has been everywhere, or double dating. And actually, I would say it's almost triple dating. So he's a former, not just member of the Labour Party, but the former president of Labour Party. He has been a member of Liberal Democrats and until recently, and they've been courting, as you said, courting him for a Senate seat, and now he's certainly a Liberal candidate. Whatever happened to the concept of loyalty and standing on some principles and beliefs? You know, these are parties that are diameters apart in their beliefs and their policies and so on. How do you make sense of this type of politics that is not just simply starting to pervade our politics, but actually comes straight from the Prime Minister's office?
Well, I suppose you can say from Warren Mundine's point of view that he has made a political transition from left of centre to right of centre politics, and that happened over some years. I think it is very peculiar that someone has talks simultaneously with two parties, that is the Liberal Party and the Liberal Democrats, about a parliamentary seat. That does seem very odd indeed. But from the Prime Minister's point of view, not only do you have this situation where people will say, oh, well, you know, he was a Labor man only a while ago, and do we really want this candidate? Not just that, but do we want this candidate just parachuted in and somebody who's got local support pushed aside in a very rough sort of way? But there's also, I think, the risk for Scott Morrison that Warren Mundine could be quite unpredictable during the election campaign. One issue, for example, on which he differs from the Prime Minister is the whole question of Australia Day. The Prime Minister thinks it would be terrible to have it shifted from January 26. Warren Mundine thinks it should be January 1. Now, Warren Mundine has a line on this saying, yes, he still thinks that, but it's not a priority. It's sort of the 100th on his list. But it's only one example, I think, where something could come up in the election campaign and he could be at odds with his new party. And in a campaign where you've got to be very disciplined, that is a risk. He's disciplined at the moment, but can he see it through to the election without getting off message?
Let me pick on this issue of the Australia Day, the date for Australia Day. Scott Morrison's views are well known on it, and one of the steps he's recently taken, which seems like a pretty strong step, that he's insisting that the consuls hold citizenship ceremonies on the 26th of January, and if they don't do it, he would revoke their right to do so. Now, a Prime Minister who's trying to protect a certain date for Australia Day, I mean, in some ways it's a reasonable demand on the part of the Prime Minister, but is this truly a measured response, or is it an overkill?
It's obviously an attempt to pursue the culture wars. Some councils, but only very few, have said that they will not have ceremonies on Australia Day because of Indigenous opposition to Australia Day being that day. But as I say, it's only a handful, and it does seem rather heavy-handed, this response. But as well as that measure, he's also said that there should be a dress code, and that dress code should be that people attending these ceremonies shouldn't dress, for example, in board shorts or wear thongs. Now, I think that that sort of does open up the Prime Minister to a bit of ridicule, to a sort of national horse laugh. Firstly, I don't think too many people would be turning up to the ceremonies dressed like that, but you have to say, well, isn't this a bit prescriptive? Isn't this a bit ridiculous? Aren't these clothing items associated with the Australian summer? What's he on about? Well,
when I was in Canada, we used to associate thongs with almost like an Australian uniform.
Well, that's right, that's right. But it is an attempt to try to find some differentiation between the coalition and Bill Shorten over Australia Day, because Bill Shorten has said, well, he agrees the date shouldn't be moved, and of course surveys show that most Australians want the present date retained. So that date's in no danger, but the coalition's trying to whip up a sort of storm suggesting it is, and indeed one backbencher, Dean Smith, has proposed that there should be new legislation saying that if you wanted to change the date of Australia Day, you'd have to consult all Australians, in other words, have a plebiscite. Now, that just seems to be going over the top as well.
Michelle, let me return to some of the internal problems of the Liberal Party. The decision of Kelly Dwyer to not run in the next election has again put the spotlight on the Liberals' so-called women problem. They have already serious issue with women in the party, particularly in the leadership ranks, and now this. Is this just another step towards more of these kind of decisions coming up from women? How do you rate the chances of Liberal Party actually getting around this perception that it is not a women-friendly party?
Well, Kelly O'Dwyer has two very young children. and holding a cabinet position is a difficult juggling act. She says she wants to have a third child, which would make it even harder. So her individual case is, as it were, perfectly understandable. And if there were a lot of women in the Liberal Parliamentary Party, and if there were a substantial number on the front bench, this would pass without a great deal of note as an individual case. But when you have this whole controversy about the fact that the Liberals have just a tiny minority of their parliamentarians female, it becomes a huge issue. I don't think they can do anything about this perception before the election. They refuse to embrace quotas. This is obviously an organisational matter of getting more women through the ranks to be MPs. You don't do it overnight. Even if you had quotas, you couldn't do it extremely quickly. So the image is there for the election, and it's a bad image, and it's going to be a negative with some women voters in what is an incredibly tough election. It has put some attention on Julie Bishop, who of course was former, or is former Deputy Liberal leader. Now, she's been very coy about her intention. She said she will recontest her seat. She's on the backbench at the moment. You'd have to wonder, and many of her colleagues wonder, why on earth she would stay. Wouldn't she just bail out before the election? There's a general theory that she's trying to choose her successor. She wants to keep some people out of the seat. The other interpretation is that she wants to be leader if and when the Liberals lose. But opposition leaders, pretty tough gig, especially after you've had years as Foreign Minister. It's obviously a critical job, but an unglamorous job, frankly, trooping around the country, holding meetings, staying in back blocks, motels and the like. And if Bill Shorten wins the election well, has 2 terms, then Julie Bishop, who is in her early 60s, I think wouldn't have a lot of chance of becoming Prime Minister. So this is someone to watch. But if she leaves, and I think she'd be rational to say, I'm going at the election, it'll be good for her, but I think it'll be bad for the perception of the Liberal Party on the question of women.
Just to put you on the spot in one word, is she running or not?
I've always thought that she was likely not to run, but been wrong many times before, so we'll see.
Diplomatic answer, as one would expect. Well, thank you, Michelle. It's been lovely talking to you, and we'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Steve.